Welcome back to Don't Be Strangers, a podcast and community fighting adult loneliness. Our mission is to create spaces that foster intentional conversations and deeper connections by providing resources and events for the curious and creative. I'm your host, Xinyi, and I typically meet my guests for the very first time while recording. If this sounds fun, I invite you to consider applying to come on and have a conversation. No qualifications required, just a passion to learn from the stories of everyday people. So if you're following along with these episodes, you'll know that I'm all caught up on my recording and editing backlog, which means hopefully from here on out, up-to-date episodes until I collect another round of backlogs. Today, we're speaking with Rob of Rob's 10K Friends. I first found out about him several years ago because one of my good friends, Melissa, told me about his project to meet 10,000 new friends, each in 1 hour conversations. And I think she finally actually did meet him a couple of years ago, and I've been following his account since she told me about him. So the premise of the project obviously has like a shock factor, but also just the pure dedication to such an overwhelming goal is definitely very admirable. Then at the beginning of this year, because I was following his account, I saw that he was doing another call for help to meet his goal, and I thought, why not? So this conversation is technically for his project, but he said that he was also down to double it for my podcast. And it was really interesting to see where our goals and interests align. So I'm not going to give away too many other spoilers, as the point of this show is for the listeners to see how two strangers get to know each other over the course of a conversation. So that being said, in this chat, we talk about our identities as pie charts, balancing your personal social life with your work when your work is all about making friends, how Rob makes his living doing this full time, his memory tricks and tips for sharing the stories of the people that he meets, and other communities out there helping you to make friends. So with that, please meet Rob.
Yeah, what's up? I am Rob Lawless, and I am the creator of Rob's 10K Friends, which is my journey to spend an hour one-on-one with 10,000 different people, and you're one of them. I think you're number 6,103 or 4, maybe.
Uh-huh.
And I'm calling in from Philadelphia on a nice snowy day, so it's great to have a conversation with you.
Love that. Yeah. And I am located currently in Mexico City.
Oh,
So yeah, if you want to toss me the first question.
yeah, let's do it. So the first question, which is my favorite question to ask people, is if you think about your identity as a pie chart, what would be the categories that make up who you are? Like, what are the slices and what are the percentages?
Yeah, I love this question. I think it's so fascinating, and I definitely want to know where you drew the inspiration for this
Mm.
question, and also to hear your answer as well. But
Sure.
immediately at the top of my head, I think like maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, I did sort of like a values exercise. I think that's pretty common in like therapy and stuff, but I found this in like a personal development book, and essentially I broke down my core values to community, courage, and curiosity. And so, that being the case, this is the answer that immediately comes to my mind. Like, my core identity is made up of these core values, and I would say it's probably pretty evenly split, like 33, 33, 33, in terms of one, the community aspect why I am like pursuing the podcasting community Don't Be Strangers, but then the curiosity and courage, these two pieces with courage, I think it ties into the fact that I am like very keen on personal growth. And so I believe that change happens on the other side of fear. So I chase a lot of my fears, and that's where courage really like plays in. And I've also noticed I'm drawn to like rebels, like people who are just really doing things that are unconventional and like against the grain. So there's that. And then the part for curiosity, it's kind of leans into the courage too, just like being like what would be on the other side of fear. But
Hmm.
I'm also just like a student of life, and I just like need to know. And it also ties perfectly into community because like I that's the reason why I want to have conversations, is because I want to learn from other people, and I hope that other people would also want to learn from each other. So that's my answer, and I would be so curious to know yours.
Okay. Yeah. It's I always think about mine, and I have the benefit of having answered this like thousands of times because of my project, but I think about it in like the way that I spend my time. So I say like 60% is my project, which is meeting new people and seeing new places and learning. And I do public speaking too. That's how I support myself. So growing as a speaker, leaving like a legacy of some sort. So that's 60%. 20% is like friends and family. So that is spending time with my good friends from college and high school. And I'm the youngest of three, so seeing my two older siblings, my sister has two kids, seeing them, my parents are still alive, still together. So taking advantage of that time with them. And then 10% music. Like I have two guitars. I took lessons for 2 years in high school. So I don't really play that often now, but like music is still a big part of my life. And I love going to concerts and stuff. And then 5% fitness. So like going to the gym 3 days a week, 5% reading, trying to read like an hour before bed every night. And that's it. And then Philly sports is in there all over the
Yeah.
place. But yeah, that's how I would say the breakdown. I'd be curious to, because you have like community, curiosity, and courage.
Yeah.
And you mentioned with the communities, like the podcast is the way that manifests and being attracted to like the rebels and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, like if you think about the way what you put your time into, if you had
Yeah.
to bring it to that level, what would that look like?
Yeah, yeah. I think that if I had to bring it to the level of like how I spend my time, it would probably be I'm a software engineer by trade, and that's my professional day job.
Mm.
I think I remember reading somewhere. I don't try to research my guests too much because part of the part of the beauty of like these conversations and this podcast is to show listeners and viewers like how two strangers get to know each other over the
Yes,
course of a conversation. So I don't want to like know too much about you before
totally agree. Yeah.
and then become like an interview of sorts, like, and see like, oh, I read an article like
Hmm.
5 years ago you did this, right? But yeah, so I'm a software engineer by trade. That is my day job, but I would say I would only I'm like I spend 15% of my time on that because I am a creative chimera, which means that I need a lot of different activities to stimulate me and to make me feel fulfilled. And so, as like a side gig, this podcast is actually it started as a podcast, Don't Be Strangers, but then it evolved more into community. So I'm now doing a lot of event planning and like running events
Hmm.
also remotely. But all of this is just like passion projects. So I spend another maybe 15% on Don't Be Strangers between editing the podcast, sourcing it, running events. Last year I published a book and then I was like trying to market that. I'm really interested in transitioning into public speaking.
Yeah,
So I would love to like pick your brain on
for
that,
sure.
either on or off
Yeah,
recording.
either one, happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then outside of that, I identify personally as an artist. Like I said, creative chimera, right? An artist of many different mediums. So I need to personally, for my time, like how music is like your thing. For me,
Hmm.
art, which is like graphic design, digital or like analog, creation, photography, poetry writing, etc. I don't spend enough time on this, but I'm this year I am trying to intentionally create more space for that. I would say in previous years I was probably closer to 5 to 10%, but now I would like it to be closer to like 15%. So
Okay.
where are we at now? So that's like 45. And then maybe another 20 to 30% on other people. I think it naturally the community aspect that with me doing events, like I do end up oftentimes in like group settings, but then I'm also intentionally trying to like create time for like family and loved ones and friends as well. Um, and then I'm traveling, right? Like I mentioned, I'm in Mexico City, so I'm a digital nomad as well.
Hmm.
And a lot of time is going to cafe. I drink a lot of coffee.
Sure, I bet.
Like, yeah. So I use that. I use coffee as like my centerpiece for exploration. So oftentimes I'm like, I'm gonna go to a cafe to like edit my podcast, do my day job, and then I like to walk to places. And so as I'm like walking to places, walking to a cafe as my destination,
Hmm.
then I'll like discover cool boutique stores or um I don't know, like little parks. And so there's a lot of exploration, which ties into the curiosity. That's why I travel. That's why I language learn. That's why I talk to people.
Yeah.
Um, and then any extra time is like me trying to do language learning, me trying to journal and just ideate like fun alternative ways to live. A little all over the place, honestly. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm reading in there too. I'm what else? Trying to play video games, trying to like watch Netflix.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I wanted to ask you though, you mentioned that you spend about 20% of your time like with family, friends, and stuff.
Hmm.
I would love to know your pro tips for managing your social life as an adult between your project, which is a lot of like people time, your personal people time, public speaking sort of people
Hmm.
time. Yeah, like how do you do it?
I think it's well, I have like my project, so I do it full time, and so I started it in November of 2015, and then I took it full time 8 months later. So I've been doing it full time since June of 2016. And then I just didn't make money for a really long time. And then public speaking is how I started to make money. And I think it was because I'm extremely extroverted, but after meeting four people every day, it's like the battery needs to be recharged.
Yeah.
And I think I just got more communicative about like, hey, I can't make it to this thing or I can't do this thing. Um, and making sure I set that time aside because I used to feel guilty if I didn't have anything going on, not going to an event or whatever. But then I realized like resting is a thing that you also have to build into your calendar.
Right.
So yeah, I think like I don't know, I feel like my life sounds busy from the outside looking in, but I feel like it's very simple. It's very structured too.
Yeah.
So I meet Monday through Friday, I meet people at 8 a.m., 10 a.m., 1 p.m., and 3 p.m. every time. Like if I'm not traveling or anything, that's what I try to schedule. So people are like, well, how do you make time for your friends from college and stuff when you're meeting all these other people? I'm like, well, I'm meeting them when they're at their jobs and I'm at what is my job. And then my nights are open the same as their nights would be open. So, like tonight, for example, I'm going to my friend's house. He lives 3 doors down from me. And we're going to play Settlers of Catan together because that's what we do most weekends with each other. Like he and his wife live right near me and they're good college friends of mine. And yeah, I don't know. I think it's just identifying like the things that you have to do and then being structured about your approach to it. Um, yeah, because even the gym, it's like I do Monday, Wednesday, Friday after my last meeting from like 6 to 7 p.m.
Yeah.
And if I know that I can expect that time to be gym time, then it's all good. Like it's organized in my mind. So I call it structured spontaneity. Like I want all the parts of my life that are fixed to be like in the calendar. And then that leaves all the other time to be spontaneous if I want it to be.
Right, right. Yeah, I love that. That makes sense. Did you develop this structure pretty early on, or was it something that you had to figure out from 2016 to now?
Early on, so I studied finance and then I did consulting for Deloitte. And then I went to a tech startup. And then I had been doing this project for like 8 months before I was laid off. The company was acquired. And then I jumped into this full time. And early on, I was like, oh, you can do Tuesday at 2 p.m. Great, let's do that. And then the next person, Wednesday at 8, sure, let's do that. And then my mind was just all over the place. And I noticed I was going through that like decision fatigue. So
Mm,
after like a week, I thought, okay, we need to put this into a 9 to 5 structure. And
yeah,
we're going to do that because it makes it much more repeatable. And I think predictability is like a hugely undervalued thing in people's lives.
yeah,
So yeah, I just had, and I guess I'm a mix between very logical and creative. So I had to have the logical piece in place so that I could let the creative piece thrive in peace, if that makes sense.
right. No,
Yeah,
that makes perfect sense. Yeah, I love that. And also only 1 week to like getting to the okay, from disorder to structure.
sure.
That's pretty incredible. Yeah, that's awesome. Um, yeah.
Yeah,
Do you want to ask me something else?
yeah, for sure. So the oh, and real quick, I'll let you know too with the pie chart you like asked where it came from. the I started asking people that because I was noticing in my hour-long conversations with them, it could be really easy to talk about a job for 40 minutes or whatever, or maybe it's really easy to talk about a particular hobby. But my goal when I meet with people is like I want to understand the full person as best as I can. And when I ask that question, it gives them the chance to give me context. Like, oh, that job we've been talking about is really just like 30% of who I am. And
Right.
the other 70% is this, 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 and this. And I'm like, oh, okay, I can kind of contextualize it all now. So
That's
that's why,
so smart. That's
yeah,
so
yeah.
smart. I love that.
And
Yeah.
I tell people too in my talks, because I give it as a question when I do my presentations. I say it helps you see people as they see themselves. And
Yeah.
I think that's really important. Like I write about people after I meet with them, and I want to make sure what I write they feel is an accurate representation of who they are.
Yeah.
So I want to give them the chance, like instead of me making assumptions based on our conversation, have them explain it to me, and I'm like, oh, okay, I know who you are. So
Right. Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 So that's where that came from, and then I will ask you. So you're a software engineer. Like, if money and careers didn't matter, would you still do that, or like, what would be your dream for your life?
Yeah, I think the dream for my life would be one where I just made art and people would just pay me for my art. And
Mm.
it's like where people would pay me for my art, but like not because they are demanding certain art of me, but I just create and people want like whatever it is I'm creating, and I have the full like range of creativity where I can like publish a book and people would be like, "Oh, that's interesting. Like what is she exploring mentally?" Or I can just like throw a painting out there and people will be like, oh yeah, that's like, yeah, another Xinyi, or
Hmm.
that's like very um I like if I could literally make money from like doing anything I want. But that being said, I am actually pretty satisfied with my current lifestyle in terms of career and what I'm doing. I did go through like a mid-career crisis pretty
Hmm.
early on, being like, what am I doing here 8 hours a day? And I realized that like, why does society force us to niche down to like a very specific skill set, when all our lives before we were forced into adulthood and like a career, we're forced to study like all these different subjects, and like I feel like that's the full breadth of what like like being human is having more than just like one thing you specialize in. It's like having PE and then going to your art class and then studying some math, whether you like math or not. But you know, it's still like a skill that you can explore and engage with, at whatever level you want to engage it with. And I realized like pretty early on that even though I was getting pretty tired of doing software engineering, that quitting my job and going to another field will not solve the issue, because I would just be putting myself in another 8 hour type thing. There was also a time, because of all this frustration of being like, I'm doing the same thing like for so many hours a day. Um, that I thought, oh, I should become a girl boss, like, you know, entrepreneurship, like that's like all the rage, right? Become my own boss. But given my personality and like who I am, I had the self awareness that like I'm gonna quit my 40-hour like week job and like become consumed by like an 80-hour week,
Hmm.
you know, like personal project. And so thankfully, because of that awareness, I was like, you need to, while you're still in like a 9 to 5 situation, figure out how to control your own schedule before you jump into entrepreneurship and let that like destroy you, essentially. Create some structure, right? And so through all that like you know self evaluation, I realized that I don't need to quit my 9 to 5 job. What I need to do is actually find more effective ways to do this, and then introduce other elements of what makes me fulfilled in life, which is having diversity and exploration of thought. So most days I try to work only 2 hours a day. Yes, I'm logging 8 hours. I became comfortable with this idea, partially through the through what I learned through like the 4 Hour Work Week by Tim
Mm.
Ferriss, but then also because there initially was some guilt where I'm like, what am I lying? Like, is this okay to like say I'm working 8 hours but actually only be working two? But then I came to that conclusion because I was like, I am so frustrated by having to do one thing for 8 hours. Even if it was don't be a strangers for 8 hours, I could not do that. That would just drive me crazy to have to like just do this like work in this one scope for so long, that I was like, would my company rather have me quit completely because I just don't want to, or can I just deliver them high quality work that I can accomplish in 2 hours, but is like maybe the equivalent of like 8 hours of like mediocre, distracted. I'm like
Hmm.
doing coffee chats with my coworkers, taking 2 hour lunches, like whatever. And so I became comfortable with this idea. I was like, yes, fine, 2 hours a day, and then let me introduce other things that make me more fulfilled. So don't be strangers makes me feel fulfilled, because I can help other people. My art makes me feel fulfilled because it's my creative self-expression. And then everything else, like getting to travel with my job, like because it is remote, etc., etc. So I've already forgotten what was the original question as I've been rambling.
No, it's good.
um
I can bring it back. The question was like, if jobs and careers didn't matter, what would
right,
you want to
yeah,
do? And you were saying like you would want to get to the point where you can get paid to create your art, um,
right, yeah.
which made me think of another question, which is, are there, when you think of that concept of like getting paid to do your art, and you could do this or you could do
Mhm.
that, who right now is doing that really successfully that you look up to or you see as an example?
I think like off the top of my head, Miyazaki of like Studio Ghibli. I feel like every time he releases a new film, people just are like, "What is this? What has he made?"
Okay.
But anyone else, I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
kind of. It reminded me, I was thinking of like Childish Gambino, and I just started watching Dave last night, which is Lil Dicky's TV show. And it's like these people who can act and then they can do music and all the different stuff. But
yeah.
yeah, it would be cool. I think art, I think I'm, while I have that logical creative split, I'm much more attracted to the creative side of life.
Yeah. I have some follow-up questions for you too. One, I'm really
Sure.
curious to know what your process is like of like distilling your 1 hour conversations into presenting like content about these people
Hmm.
you interview. Um, yeah, let's start with that.
Yeah. So I always, whether I meet someone in person, which is how I used to meet everyone until COVID happened, or if I meet them virtually, my goal is always to have their post published within 60 minutes of us ending our meeting together. So like, for example, for us, we're meeting virtually, we'll have like a video and stuff. As I'm talking to people, like I'm thinking of the narrative of their life, because when I write about them, I really just want to share to my audience, like, hey, here's who this person is, here's where they came from, here's where they are, here's where they want to go. And it often includes like their family dynamic or their education or their career or their hobbies outside of that or their passions that they're working on. So it's like all of those different things come together to string this narrative of who a person is. So yeah, I think about that as I talk to people. And when I talk to people, like if it's virtual, because when I meet in person, I don't have any type of recording or anything. I just
Yeah.
remember everything and then I write it. And when it's virtual, if I hear something that catches my attention, I'll be like, oh, okay, that would be a cool 60-second clip. I will remember
Yeah.
that and go back to that. So that's kind of the process. And I write in my iPhone notes and then I copy and paste it into Instagram. And yeah, I will cut down to a minute clip in QuickTime. I'll throw it in CapCut. I add the captions. I put it out. I take a picture with everyone. So you'll see it for us. But when I do virtual, like when I'm in person, I have a stranger take a photo of me and the person I'm with.
Yeah.
And when I am virtual, I have the person I'm talking to send me a selfie afterwards, and I take a selfie, and then I assemble it together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you need water or anything?
I had like I don't know what I had earlier this week, but I had like the flu or RSV or one of the two, so I'm on the tail end of it.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, but that is just being able to like hold that information in your head while you're having that conversation. Like, I definitely don't think I can. I'm not there. Is this a natural skill that you've always had that like when you talk to people, you're just able to latch onto these different pieces of information and just like recall it?
I think it was like a skill that I saw more so through my like through my studies. I was
Okay.
the type of person who had like the photographic memory, so I always
Mm,
tested really well because I would just think back to like what did the formula look like on this page? Was it on the upper half of the page or the lower half? And I'm really good with like acronyms in my mind too. I would
mm,
make up acronyms, and I will still do that for some. Like if someone tells me their major or something in their school, I'll think of
yeah.
like an act just to make it easier. But I'm a very visual person, so when I talk to people, I'm watching their lives as they're talking to me.
Okay.
And
Like you're imagining like the how it plays.
exactly, yeah. So you talk about like doing like artwork or like graphic design or painting, whatever it might be, and I can like picture you in the studio, or you talk about traveling to Mexico City. Okay, like I see you there, I see you like typing at the computer for software engineering. So, and I find when I do that, it's like you say that you couldn't do it, but I'm sure if you went and watched a movie, let's say like the Barbie movie was big last year, say you went and
Yeah.
saw that and you came out of the theater afterwards and I said, "Hey, tell me about the movie. Like, what's the plot? Who's in it?" You'd be able to tell me about the characters. You'd be able to tell me about the flow of the plot and what happened. So I'm just doing that same action, but I'm doing it through listening to people's stories instead of watching the movie.
Oh, that's yeah. That's really clever. I'm gonna have to start doing that because I've found that, you mentioned that you're very extroverted.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an ambivert, so interestingly enough, with like all the events and stuff, it's been very taxing on me because I just keep thinking like I'm introverted by nature. But like I would say that I was more introverted and like became more functionally ambiverted due to society and like
Sure.
growing up and integrating and stuff. And so oftentimes like while I'm hosting events and stuff, I'm just like, how did I get here? Why am I hosting events? Because this is really exhausting to have to like lead groups and stuff.
Mm.
But that's to give you context to like for especially meeting new people. I've noticed after these like strangers recording podcast stuff, I need to go take a nap because I am maybe because despite being an artist and being visual, like when I have the conversations, I'm not using this like memory trick of like visualizing, but I am actually trying to hold on to the things that you've told me in terms of
Yeah.
like, yeah, like text in my mind. And at the end of the conversation, I feel like I've gone through like an interview, even though it's just like
Mm.
because I'm trying so hard to hold on to these pieces of information so I can like loop back to them, so I can like ask you about them and like follow up. um so yeah, this is gold for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's I'm sure you've gotten better at it too in your version, but for me, I had to like really actively listen to people too. I think that skill got a lot better, and because again, like in person, I didn't have anything to rely on afterwards to write about people. So if I didn't listen to what they were telling me, it was like felt like trying to take an exam without ever reading the textbook. Like you just won't
Yeah,
have the answers. If you miss it, it's gone. So
right.
I had to, and it was good because it made me very present in my conversations with people. Like it forced me to not think about what I'm doing this weekend. I'm only thinking about what you're telling me. So
Right.
yeah, it
Yeah.
became like a better skill, but I think it was hard. Like I had a good foundation with it.
Yeah. 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 So you mentioned that you read 5% of your time. What are
Sure.
you currently reading?
I'm reading a book. I think it's called. It's like I forget the title, but it's The Rise and Fall of the Vanderbilt Dynasty. It's
Okay.
written by Anderson Cooper, which like the CNN host. I forgot that he's a descendant of the Vanderbilts. His mom is a Vanderbilt.
I did not know that.
Yeah, I heard it one other time and then I forgot, and then this reminded me. But it's an interesting book because it's kind of like I'm into biographies. Like I would love to read how the Vanderbilt dynasty got started. Like how
Yeah.
did he succeed in business and stuff. And same with like Rockefellers, like Carnegie's, all that stuff. But the book is less so of like the guy who started it all. It really just touches on him, and then it's kind of the generations and what happened with each generation, and it brings in like New York socialite kind
Okay.
of
Yeah,
society of
vibes. Uh-huh.
yeah, because like these people were having like these incredibly wealthy parties and like the Gilded Age and stuff, and they would get all the other rich New York socialites to come to their parties, and it just reminds me of like when you think Roaring Twenties, nineteen
Yeah.
twenties parties,
Great
like they were
Gatsby.
yeah, like they were doing that type of stuff.
Right,
um,
yeah.
but also the some of the darker parts of it too, like custody battles over children and stuff, and divorce
Yeah.
and all the stuff that goes along with it. So it's an interesting book. And then after this, I think I'm gonna read Feel Good Productivity.
Okay.
Do you know of that one?
No, I don't know about of that one, but
So
the
I think
title seems pretty self-explanatory.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
the dude who wrote it is a popular YouTuber,
Okay.
Ali Abdul, I think, or
Oh
something
yeah,
like.
I've heard of this person. Yeah. Yeah. I
So
don't really live on YouTube, but yeah, I've definitely heard of
yeah,
him.
me neither. But it seems like he seems like someone who's good at taking complex topics and being like, here's a good way to think about it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah. What about you?
So I'm going to interrupt here to say that if you found any part of this conversation interesting or useful, please pause to give this show a follow and a rating. Or if you know of a loved one who could benefit from what we're sharing, please take 2 seconds to share this episode. Yeah, I just finished a book called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
Oh, okay.
Um, have you heard of this book?
I've heard
It
of one
is.
called like Zen and the Art of Tennis, but
This is the
oh,
book.
okay.
I just finished it, and it's really dense. It's like a lot of philosophy, so it kind of like tricks you into, I mean, maybe like it should be obvious because it says Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance and Inquiry into Values is like the subtitle. So
Mm,
you would think that like, okay, it would, yeah, it's about philosophy, it's about values, but it kind of weaves in the story of like a motorcycle trip across America
mm,
with this dude's like deep reflections on very high level philosophical concepts, and most of the time I just my eyes just glazed over and I was like, I don't know what's happening right now. But the reason why I picked up this book was because I met someone recently who we were talking about art and science and how like I both appreciate art and science. I studied molecular biology in college and then also minored in neuroscience, and then now I do software engineering. But like I said, I identify as an artist first and foremost. Um, so because of that conversation, she was like, I have a book recommendation for you. You should read this. And I already had the book because my husband, he had read it a while ago, and like I heard good things about it, but I was just resistant. But like when this girl like suggested it, I was like, fine, like you also like art and science, so let me
hmm.
try it. I still need to, it's like on my to-do list to go ask Chat GPT like what I read. I mean, I like highlighted
Yeah.
it. I highlighted lines that were like that of there are moments of clarity within the text where I'm like, I understand these two sentences and it makes perfect sense to me. Like they had a like a little passage about like loneliness and technology and
Mm,
the and how it's like interconnected, and how like people are blaming loneliness on technology, but in actuality that's not, like he's making a counter argument. And I was like, clarity, yes,
hmm.
like don't be strangers. And I was like, highlight. But then that's like maybe I would say 10% of the book. It was where I had clarity and I was like, I
Okay.
get what you're saying. And then the other like 90%, I'm like, I don't know what you're trying to argue about, because he keeps like calling out like Aristotle and then like bringing their concepts in. But anyways, I was gonna ask, do you typically read nonfiction, or like what genres are you drawn to?
Yeah, I would say I do nonfiction mostly, and a lot of like memoirs, biographies, autobiographies. Same kind of interest that
Yeah,
I have in people, but
yeah,
because I do like fiction too. I've read because I feel like taking your mind to a different world is also productive and
Yeah.
like keeping your imagination alive. So
Yeah.
I have no problem with fiction. um, I've struggled with like self help books because I feel like I've already like I find with my project I'm already very motivated to do it, and I think a lot of
Yeah.
self help books are like, here's how you get motivated to make change in your life. And
Yeah.
for me, my issue over the last several years has not been like it's not been I need to be motivated to move. I'm already moving. It's more like
Right.
I need to know what steps I need to, very specific with like speaking, for example. If I have 10
Yeah.
hours that I can put somewhere right now, what is the right place to distribute that when it comes to
Right.
speaking? Like, should I be hitting people up through email? Should I be writing articles and posting them to LinkedIn? So it's like discovering the answers to those questions. Um, but yeah, that's how I think the productivity one I am thinking of as like a potential cool book to read because like maybe it will make me think about my process differently. Like the
Right.
system in which I do things is really I feel like it's like I just want the system to be there and then I want to iterate and iterate and iterate until it
Yeah.
becomes like super efficient. But
Right.
yeah, so mainly like biographies and my favorite book I think that I've read is Shoe Dog by Phil Knight.
Okay. I'm not familiar with this.
So Phil Knight is the guy who started Nike,
Okay.
and it's his memoir, and it's just really interesting because I feel like we think of Nike today as a company that obviously is going to be really successful, and you go back and hear his side of it, and there's so many times where it could have succeeded or failed,
Right.
and
Yeah.
because of like understanding that those moments exists makes me feel a lot better when I feel like my project could either succeed or fail, or like with
Right.
like I
Right.
think once people achieve success, we start to forget that they ever had an equal opportunity not to succeed.
Right.
And having that context, I think, is really important.
Yeah. Do you think you'll ever write a book, considering that what you do and like you like biographies and memoirs?
Yeah, I signed to a literary agent last year, so
Okay.
we're kind of in the works. Like I have like a book title in place and an overview, kind of like a marketing strategy. Not even a strategy, but just like a reach, like who things I've been on and whatnot. But yeah, it's been like a slow moving process. We're kind of at the place where we're trying to just put together a proposal and then go to a publisher and get a deal. But I've had so many people through my journey be like, "Oh, are you going to write a book or you should write a book?" And so I feel like it would be really dumb of me not to write a book. I
Right.
personally am not excited about writing a book, but because it always took me forever to write papers in college and stuff. So I don't think it will be a particularly enjoyable experience, but I think I would enjoy the idea of getting what's in my mind out into the hands of other people.
Right. Yeah. No, I feel I feel you on that.
Yeah.
Um,
Would you do that
uh,
for your work? Because I'm sure we have like learned similar things.
Yeah, so the book I published last year, it was
That's
called
right.
How
Yeah.
to Talk to How to Talk to Anyone for Introverts. And I see it as like something that's like very aligned with my mission of fighting adult loneliness under Don't Be Strangers because I see that like a lot of people are under the assumption that communication and like these like social skills are like innate and inborn because like humans are social creatures. So it's like if you suck at communicating, if you suck at like talking to people, then you just will always suck. But I
Mm,
think that it's something that's very much overlooked in school. Like a lot of life skills are overlooked in schooling, right? Where it's just like, actually, this is a trained skill and you can get better at communicating, get better at asking questions, get better at listening. And so that was like my mission behind putting out that book because the other issue that I see with loneliness is that people have friends but like are not achieving a profound level of connection with their friends, so they still feel very lonely, and there's like this
mm,
confusion of like, well, I have like all these people I could like always hit up and like go do board games with or like go do yoga with, but why do I still feel like like very isolated? And part of it is like the quality of conversations. And so that's how I kind of saw the book playing into like my greater mission, being like, here's a resource.
Yeah.
My community gives you events that you can go to and potentially meet people, but if you don't connect with these people, then there's something else that you need to work on.
Hmm.
That is, yeah, that I'm trying to still like hold your hands and like try to get you there, and let me see how I can provide you with like the resources and events to kind of like bridge this gap that I see.
Nice.
Yeah.
When did you start Don't Be Strangers again?
So I started the podcast, I think the July 2021.
Oh, okay.
And then I would say like shortly after that, within like less than half a year, I really saw the need for like a community component because I got to meet really cool people like you. And then
Hmm.
I felt frustrated on the behalf of the listeners. I was like, oh, well, if I'm a listener and I thought that Rob was really cool, then I wouldn't really get to like connect with you as like a listener, right? But I just like hear you talk, and so I started a digital pen pals club initially to like get people to connect. And like I had past guests who would participate as well in the digital pen pals club. So I was just trying to get people to connect in like the long form written medium. And I did made it digital because I was traveling as well at that time. So I was like, if I made this physical, I wouldn't be able to participate. I do love like physical letters though.
Yeah.
And then shortly after that, people in the Pen Pals Club were like, can we meet on Zoom? So then that's how we trickled into like virtual events. This was all still like really close to the pandemic, right? 2021.
Hmm.
And then I thought the logical next step was like physical in-person meetups. And that's how I didn't realize that my podcast would become like events and
Hmm.
like and have the like elements of public speaking, right? Because I have to like stand up and tell people how to interact in the event and stuff.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
There, so July 2021, you started the podcast, you said?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. There's have you ever heard of No More Lonely Friends?
I don't think so. Is this the picnic
Yeah, yes.
group?
It's the girl who went viral on TikTok because you know what I'm talking about?
Okay, so I don't live on TikTok either, but I think someone else within like the community told me about this like New York picnic
Yeah, yeah.
situation. Yeah, that's like I think the name sounds very yeah,
So
familiar.
yeah, it just reminds me the girl's name is Marissa. Ironically, she was part of my project back in like 2017.
Yeah.
And then she was in like LA pursuing acting at the time. And then I think it was like 2020, 2021 or something. She went viral on TikTok because some guy was at a park and he overheard this group of friends being like, we're going to have the birthday party on this date because we know Marissa's not going to be in town on this date. So let's just have it then. So this guy was like, hey, this is for Marissa. If this video can find her, your friends are planning the birthday party specifically for the day you're not in town. Got back to her. It was obviously like not a very fun thing to hear.
Yeah.
And so she spun it into a positive and started hosting these meetups called No More Lonely Friends. So
Yeah.
I'm sure there's like a lot of overlap between what you do. And then there was a guy I met through my project. His name is Nick Gray. He has a book called The 2 Hour Cocktail Party.
Hmm.
And he wrote like a step by step how to have a 2 hour cocktail party.
Oh,
And
interesting.
yeah, and
I'm
it's
gonna
cool. I hosted one back in July.
how to go like perfectly as
Yeah,
prescribed.
yeah, I hate planning, so I was like reluctantly, okay, I'll do this for you. And I just I've met a lot of people here in Philly, so I wanted in my particular neighborhood, I know that I've met a lot of people who don't know each other, so I was like, I'll
Yeah.
invite them and I'll invite some of my friends and stuff, and had everyone here in my apartment, and it went really well, and people met each other, and so I was like, oh, I should do more of this, be like
That's
that
awesome.
community builder that you're already being.
Yeah. I'm definitely gonna have to look up these two people and see see what they're up to.
Hmm. Yeah, there's a lot over, I think, and kind of like we did, you get bubbled up into other people who are in the same space as you.
Yep, yep, for sure. So I want to ask you the question which I ask everyone, which is how
Hmm.
do you define a stranger and at what point did they transition from being one to not being one?
Yeah, it's that's a great question. I think that you know how there's like the ENFJ stuff.
Mm-hmm. like the Myers-Briggs.
Yeah, which I think
Yeah.
that is what when I took the test, it said I'm like ENFJ. But I think there's like a feeler versus like a thinker or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I think that I might be more of a thinker than a feeler because, like I was saying, like my system is really important to me and stuff.
Yeah.
There was a guy that I did a podcast with in LA, and like the first time the audio messed up, so we had to record it again another hour. And then I was sick and we were in a hotel room. The air conditioning kept going on, and he was like, I'll be able to edit it out. That didn't work. So we had to meet up a third time. And I think it was the second time he was telling me about someone that he knew or he heard that it takes 90 hours with someone to cross the
Mm.
threshold of being a friend with them.
Uh-huh.
Because that's like and some guy had done studies on this, like, and you think about it in your life, like, who would you consider a close friend versus not? And there are people that you click with really easily, but probably someone that you've spent like 90 hours with and you've had the chance to explore deeper topics with them would be someone that's no longer a stranger to you and you feel like a level of comfort with. So I think about it in that way because I love being able to quantify things like
Yeah.
that. Um, but I don't know. I think to me it's a very gray line, especially as someone who started a project called Rob's 10K Friends. Like,
Yeah.
it's interesting if my project gets shared on like a media thing or something, people will always comment and be like, "Oh, I have all the friends I need. I don't. It's quality over quantity. I don't need 10,000 friends." And I'm like, "Listen, I'm not getting dinner with everyone every week, but I think it's really important to see the different perspectives of life and hear how people have grown up. And if you lay that foundation with someone, every time you see that, you're contributing to that 90 hours to get to a place where they're not a stranger." So I don't know. I would say like that's a good question. I think friendship is probably closer to the 90, but I think to not be a stranger with someone, like I don't think I'm a stranger with any of the people that I've met because in the hour we've taken with each other, we've learned about like what is your family dynamic, or we'll talk about different topics
Yeah.
that mean something to that person. So
Yeah.
in that sense, I was thinking about like if I met, if I was at a bar and someone spilled their drink on me and I turned around and it was someone from my project, I'd be like, "Oh, it's okay, like no worries," right? But if it was a total stranger, I'd probably be like, what are you doing?" So
Right.
to me,
Yeah.
like a stranger is the person that you would turn around and not be mad at, and they spilled their drink on you because you know them in some sense.
Right. Yeah. So do you feel like that being said, that for someone to not be a stranger, you need at least an hour of like one-on-one conversation based off of your project or
No, I think you just need like some type of foundation with them.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't know what the cutoff on that foundation is, but like think about like a chaotic situation or something. You've like, I think people can bond very quickly if the stakes are
Right.
very high. Um, but yeah, I think if you're just sitting like next to someone at the bus for 10 minutes, then maybe not. Like you're still strangers after that interaction. I think maybe it just requires a level of depth of going into your stories with each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so now you said that like you are I am 6,000, I forgot the exact number, whatever,
Yeah.
of the 10K. How do you still feel motivated to keep going? Um, and also what happens after 10K?
Yeah. I think it's like, I would like equate that to someone asking you like, how do you still feel motivated to like create art if you've already created it in the past, right? It's
Right.
like, oh, it's a passion like that. It's not like there's a fuel tank of art that I've run out of. It's something I really enjoy doing. So I really enjoy getting to know people. And I think there's a word that I came across in this book called The Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows. And the word is
Mm,
called onism. And it's defined as the awareness of how little of the world you'll experience.
mm,
And that struck me because the more that I've met people through my project, the more I understand how limited my individual
yeah.
experience on Earth is. So it's kind of scares me to be like, there's this whole wide world like this whole world that exists out there. And if I'm lucky, I'll have like 90 years to explore it. And it's like, why are you, like, do you remember that old game show where they would push the cart through the supermarket and they try to like shove all the, the
No, I
stuff?
have no idea what you're talking
Oh,
about. Yeah,
really?
yeah. Give the listeners some context, and me give me
Yeah.
context.
So it was like a game show where you would have a shopping cart and you would go through a grocery store and like you would try to put as much stuff into the cart as possible, and whoever had the like the highest total of items in the cart would win the prize at the end. So people were just like trying to shove all this stuff into the cart to win the prize.
Yeah.
So I feel like life is a little bit like that. Like you have all this stuff that you can take advantage of
Mm,
for this limited period of time. And I feel like a lot of people are just walking through the grocery store, like looking at one item for a really long time, ignoring a bunch of others when there's all this different stuff that you could put in your cart. And I just like the book, it says if you were on your deathbed or like when you died, if someone were to ask you afterwards, what was Earth like? The
yeah.
only honest answer would be to be like, I don't really know. I passed through one time.
Yeah.
And it's like, I want to know what Earth is like. I want to be able to see what it's like in all these different perspectives. And meeting people one on one is the best way that I know how to do that. So that's
Yeah.
what kind of continues to drive me. And um, I think anything that you want to do in life, you can do with someone else. It's the novelty just hasn't worn off for me because everyone's story is different. So yeah, that's what continues to motivate me. And then I think like I'm in a place now where with my speaking, I'm just getting to the point of being able to afford rent and groceries and stuff without thinking like, okay,
Right.
how am I going to do this next month? And that's a
Right.
great place to be. And as I get to that place, then I'm like, okay, then I guess you try to buy a house at some point in your life and you try to do these other other things. So trying to just like build more towards those traditional milestones through speaking
Yeah.
and yeah, growing as a speaker. I hope that once I'm done the project, which will probably take like 8 more years,
Yeah.
that I'm a seasoned speaker who's able to speak like 2, 3 times a month and support myself on that alone.
Yeah.
And then I think it'd be cool to be a professor at a university. Like you were saying, some of these schools don't teach like the life skills.
Yeah.
Um, I want to have a class where students pair off one on one every class period and learn
Yeah.
from each other's backgrounds rather than a textbook or a PowerPoint slide. So they can start creating empathy at an age like before they get out into the real world.
Right. Yeah. I love that. And
Yeah.
I think like just even listening to that, there's so many parallels, and maybe that's the reason why we seek these conversations with like strangers.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like you were mentioning something about at, like on your deathbed, like and being asked like what is Earth like.
Mm-hmm.
I have thought to myself something similar where I'm like, what would be my biggest regret? On my deathbed. And I think like for me with that curiosity element in like my core values, it's like it's not having experienced enough, and like how will I experience enough because I only get one life to live, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's why and how I've solved that is through conversations with other people, because I also think about that I don't know about things that I just don't know, because of like my upbringing, my context, even my language framework, because I care about learning languages, limiting the about what I can think about, what I can explore. And so I think like the second closest thing, if I can't like live that life, if I can't you live your life, is to talk to you and like
Mm-hmm.
learn a little bit about it. And through that like secondhand experience, be like, okay, so what would it be like to like quit my job and like go full time just meeting people, vicariously through hearing your story, and then thinking about your story, and then thinking about who I am and trying to like see if there's anything that I need to change about my life to make
Mm-hmm.
it better. And sometimes there is nothing, and it was just like a fun like, oh, I got to like live this alternative life that like has that has no application in mind, but has like a lot of like parallels in terms of like human experience.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like fun to listen to and learn. Other times like it does make me like stop and think like, oh, how can I live differently? Like what can I apply based off of like what I learned from you. And like I think definitely one of the things I'm gonna have to start practicing is visualizing as
Oh,
people
yeah.
are speaking to me. Yeah, so it makes it
Hmm.
easier to recall. Yeah.
Yeah.
um
How many languages do you speak, by the way?
so I feel like a lot of like half languages. So I've in the last couple of years in the pandemic, I started learning Spanish from zero. And then because of like the remote work situation, intentionally traveling to Spanish speaking countries to learn it. So now I feel like my Spanish is like upper intermediate to like low advance. I
Hmm.
definitely feel like I could just move to Spain and just like fill out forms and like live, do banks and like talk to
Nice.
people and take care of things. Mandarin is something that is like cultural and has that like ethical root for me, but something that I lost immigrating to America at age 7,
Hmm.
and then kind of rejecting that because I wanted to assimilate and not stand out and
Sure.
be bullied. And then later in life, around high school, being like, wait, it's actually cool to be different. Like I want to,
Hmm.
I want to be Chinese, not like American, or I just want to be Asian American, Chinese American. And so like dipping my toes back into that, and like right now I think my Spanish is actually better than my Mandarin, but I have over the course of my life tried to explore so many different languages. Like I have started trying to like learn so many different ones,
Hmm.
but dedication and like discipline is something else, right? Like being
Sh-
interested in something versus like actually being like, I'm gonna sit down and study and talk to people
yeah.
in this. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Um,
where did you live in China and where did you live in the States?
Yeah, so I was born in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, but ethnically, like my
Ah.
family is Chinese. So like, but all my extended like my ancestors are from like southern China, in like the Guangzhou region. So like my family speaks Hokkien, the dialect Hokkien, Cantonese, and Mandarin. And then
Hmm.
because like they grew up in Malaysia, and that was like where I had the first 7 years of my life, also nationally been taught like Malay as like the national language in conjunction with English. So when you like study in Malaysia, it's like you have to learn both English and Malay. And then
Yeah.
because of family, they also know like Hokkien, Cantonese, and Mandarin. And then in America, I grew up primarily in like the greater Dallas Fort Worth area.
Oh,
And
okay.
that's where like my immediate family still is. And that's like my home base.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
And where did you go to school? Like
I
university?
Yeah, University UT Dallas, University of Texas at Dallas.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Was there anything else that you wanted to touch on before I stop the recording? And we don't need to like stop talking when I stop the recording, but
Yeah, let me think. Well, yeah, because you asked me like what does the future hold for you? Like where to
yeah. I am so like I see Don't Be Strangers as a playground because it started as a podcast, and the podcast was truly a curiosity because I used to do YouTube back in the day, and when I was doing YouTube, it really makes you hyper focus on what is good content. And so I was always thinking about like what can I film, because I was actively doing YouTube for like a very short period of my time. And part of that constant evaluation of my life of like what makes good content made me realize that a lot of the conversations I had with my personal friends would make really interesting content
Mm,
because the conversations were just like profound, interesting, looked for greater meaning in life than just like surface level activities, actualizations, catching up. And so I thought like, oh, I wish that like my camera was like running right now, as we are
mhm,
chatting. And so fast forward like, with the podcast, I thought to myself, YouTube was kind of complicated because you have to take in that video element. You have to like, I don't know, have good lighting, have good backdrop, etc. So I was like, what if I just like I consume a lot of podcasts. Like why don't I try podcasting? Because it's just voice, right? So you don't have to worry if like you're wearing proper clothing or anything.
sure.
Like no one's gonna well, now I've started adding a video element, so sort of I do. But
Mhm,
um Yeah, so it started as a podcast, and then as I told you, it like evolved into events, and then I published that book, and so I really see it as like a playground. So looking forward, like what's next? Last year I had my first like semi public speaking gig. It was like a panel, so it felt way more comfortable being
Sure.
introverted than just like standing up and like having to have a script memorized. But I see that like hopefully more books around this topic to just like support the community, as I said, more public speaking gigs. But this year I'm gonna try a very small retreat, which I see, which actually like way back when I was doing the Pen Pals Club, someone actually suggested to me, they were like, can I would love to see a Don't Be Strangers retreat. And I thought to myself, like, what the heck would you,
Hmm.
I guess like similar to your situation where some where people were like, you should write a book, and so you're just like, okay, well, I guess I'm gonna write a book now. So the retreat situation is very similar, where I would have never thought of doing a retreat. Well, first of all, like because I would never thought of doing events, um, but someone brought it up, and I was like, yeah, maybe. And so this end of March, I'm gonna try my first retreat. I need to be better about marketing this. Very very tiny for like
Hmm.
just girls. I just thought I would just make the scope very small so it's safe
Sure.
for me. Like 5 women and then a co-host and I in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, and the concept or theme is just like unplugging. It's just like it's called Spring Break Healing Girl Retreat. So it's like reading, yoga, like exploring together, eating together, like journaling together. And I
Hmm.
just wanted like that because I was like, I don't want to look for speakers to come in to like teach anything. I don't like, let's just start easy. In my mind, it's almost like a beta trial. So like, I'm like,
Hmm.
let's beta trial the retreat. If the retreat goes well, then that'll inform like how I want to proceed with that. Does that mean I'll do more retreats? Does that mean I'll like start offering this as a service? Like, Rob, do you want to host a retreat and I can help you
Hmm.
retreat plan? And it's
Sure.
like Rob's 10K friends retreat, and I can provide that as a service to you, and then we could like partner like that. Or um so I don't really know where this is going, to be quite honest. That's the short answer. Is like I didn't expect to get here.
Yeah.
So I have no idea where it's headed, but I'm just having fun along the way.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's I've tried to do the same with like my goal is to meet 10,000 people one on one for 1 hour each.
Yeah,
And then that's it. And like however that evolves is up to the universe. So we just see
right.
where it goes.
So I'd love to hear from you. How would your identity break down into a pie chart based on how you spend your time, or what are your top values? If you want to help Rob with his project, you can reach out to him on Instagram and say hi. That is at Rob's 10K friends with like 10 and then the letter K. Likewise, if you want to hop onto this podcast to share a conversation with me, you can write to me on Instagram at Don't Be Strangers or via email at shinyi@don'tbestrangers.com. It'll all be linked below, so don't worry about memorizing this. And typically here at the end, I share a little voice blog with some updates from my life just for funsies. Today is Tuesday, January 30th, and I've been in La Ciudad de Mexico, Mexico City, for a month, and this is like my fourth time in the city. The third time during like winter or quarter 1, January. And honestly, the air pollution here is no joke. I don't think I really noticed it too much in my previous visits, but now it's getting pretty bad, and I have like about 3 more weeks here before I head out to Puerto Vallarta. And a part of me is just like ready for the beach and like clear ocean air to come through. Um, but that aside, I am very grateful to be back because I have a community of friends here, and one of them, mi hermana, Yvonne, that I met through a painting class here in Mexico City 2 years ago. We are meeting up weekly to do artsy creative dates, and I think it was like a collaborative ideas because obviously we met in an art class, and so our shared interest is in creative outlets. And I thought, hey, actually this year one of my goals is to create more art, or to really reconnect with the part of me that wants to explore creative self-expression. So we're doing that every week. And then outside of that, I've been intentionally creating little pockets of time and space to spend time alone with myself to make bad art. And then the craziest thing happened yesterday, Monday, January 29th. So this is a little story time. I don't, if you've been following on the show, you would know of JC from episode 48. So as a recap, if you don't know the spiel on that, I was in New York City for the month of August 2023. And at the end of my stay there, I noticed that this Instagram account called Self Hug Club was like liking my stuff. This was like maybe 2 days before I had to leave at the end of my month stay in New York. And we started messaging each other because Don't Be Strangers and Self Hug Club. There's like a lot of overlap in terms of like personal development, self awareness, self love, and we like hit it off. But unfortunately, she was busy and we couldn't meet while I was in New York because that's where she's based. But we agreed to do a little podcast swap the following week when I was back in Dallas. And so that's how we met over a call, like this one with Rob. And then fast forward, we were like, okay, she basically was like, whenever you're back in New York, let me know. And I was like, okay, dude, don't you. Fast forward back like to now to present day 2014 January, I'm thinking of ways to advertise my Healing Girl Spring Break retreat, which is happening in Puerto Vallarta at the end of March. And I had this realization that I need to just reach out to people one on one to let them know that this is happening, because I kept getting into conversations where I would talk to a friend, tell them that I was looking forward to my retreat, and they would be like, wait, what retreat? And it would make me realize that maybe I'm not as good as marketing as I thought, because I thought I had been using all my channels to tell people about this, but people are still finding out and telling me, dang, if I knew earlier, like, but I have a trip planned around that time already. So it doesn't make sense logistically or budget wise. So, anyways, going back to the story, I was reaching out to people. JC came to mind because I think that like her general vibe is very much along this. I falls within the theme of like healing girl, and I was like, hey, what are you up to nowadays? Like, I would love to invite you to this retreat. And she's like, I'm in Mexico City. And I was like, wait, what? I'm in Mexico City. And so, literally, thanks to me thinking of just like reaching out to people to touch base with them so that I could tell them that I would love to travel with them to Puerto Vallarta. I got to meet up with her in person yesterday, which was so cool. And the moral of the story is that you never know when, where, or how you're gonna meet your friends. So just remember to keep your doors open. Speaking of which, as you know, Don't Be Strangers is a platform for connecting people to create deeper friendships. And so, some things that we are doing, if you are not based in Dallas or Austin, which is where we have most of our events right now, no worries. You can one volunteer to like pop up an event in your hometown. But also, we have online events such as Jasmine's co-writing club, which happens every Sunday on our Discord. Jasmine is also offering free tarot readings for anyone who's willing to leave an honest review for my book, How to Talk to Anyone for Introverts. So if you're curious about tarot or just want a reading, that's out there. Uh, the way that you achieve this like free tarot reading is leaving an honest review for a free copy of the book as well. So it's like two free things. So thank you so much, Jasmine, for even like offering that. um, of course, you can check out our Eventbrite to see if there are any events near you. And then there is our Healing Girl retreat, which, if you don't have spring break plans for the end of March and want to unplug with my good friend Molly and I, we have some podcast episodes out here explaining like the intention of the retreat, and allows you to get to know us better as your hosts. Then please take a look. All this information for how you can connect with our community will be linked in the description. And as always, don't be a stranger.